Hey guys, Devin here from Miles Away. Today I want to do a very special video. I'm going to be doing a full review of this synthesizer here, the Korg Prologue 16 voice analog synth. Now a lot of you guys may not know this, but this is one of the core bits of my sound. I use this synth on almost every track, and I really think it's criminally underrated. So yeah, let's dive in. Hope you guys enjoy. So I think to start off, one of the things that makes a lot of people overlook this synth when comparing it to others is that it's a little bit more limited in terms of its modulation. So you only have the one LFO here, as well as your amp envelope and filter envelope. They're limited in what they can modulate. So that's definitely one of the things that makes people overlook this synth. But really, I'm a firm believer that limitations breed creativity. So that's one of the reasons why I love this synth, because it sounds amazing, and because it has a couple limitations with modulation, it forces you to kind of look outside the box. So right when we fire up the synth, it really has an amazing sound just from scratch, which sounds like this. Now, I think this opening patch is really indicative of where this synth excels, which is in really, really lush textures, pads, chords. The one thing that I think it really does better than any other synth, in my opinion, that I've tried so far is big stereo saw pads and saw synth chords. So that works really well in future bass, in a lot of dance music, house, trance, everything. And this synth really just does a great job there. So we're going to initialize the patch, and we'll go through what this synth has to offer here. So if we can initialize the patch here, we've got basically a saw wave. So this is a voltage controlled oscillator. So right off the bat, it's going to sound really lush. And if you have two of them going together, they beat together very nicely because they're constantly variable because they're pure analog waveforms. So right off the bat, I think the raw oscillators of this synth sound some of the best that I've ever heard, up there with Prophets, OB6s, Moogs. So we've got a selection of different waveforms to choose from here. So we've got saw, triangle, and then square. And then on the second oscillator, it's going to be the same. Each oscillator also has wave shaping capabilities, which is really cool here, which sounds like this. So what that allows us to do is get some really interesting, unique tones outside of the typical saw, triangle, and square wave shapes. It also allows for really quick access to pulse width modulation, which is an amazing feature on a synthesizer. You just simply go to the square wave, and the shape knob will create pulse width modulation. Going on to Oscillator 3. Now this is where the synth gets really unique. Oscillator 3 is actually a digital multi-engine, which provides, at its simplest, white noise, a number of different types of white noise, where the shape controls a high pass filter as well as the tonality of the white noise. Then we have variable phase modulation synthesis, which is essentially a lot like FM, where you can get some really crazy tones that are just not possible with analog. Quite a few different algorithms there. And then moving on, my favorite part of the multi-engine is the user oscillators. So what I've done is I've downloaded a bunch of my favorite user oscillators, and this really allows you to customize the synth. So it uses the same engine as the Minilog XD. So there's really a ton of incredible oscillators for this. Some of them, I'll demo some of them. One of my favorite user oscillators here is actually an organ. So check this out. Put that through some delay. Sounds incredible. So yeah, the multi-engine adds a really, really nice bag of tricks to an otherwise great sounding voltage controlled oscillator analog synth. So right off the bat there, I think that's one of the things that really differentiates this synth is you can really get creative with the sounds you make outside of the analog territory while maintaining that amazing analog warmth. So we'll do some demos at the end of some sounds I've made, but for now, let's move on to the filter. Now, another limitation of this synth that people sometimes criticize it for is that there's only one mode of filter, which is a 12 dB low pass filter. There's no 24 dB, there's no band pass, there's only a high pass switch. So on the surface, yes, that seems limited, but one of my favorite things about this synth is actually its filter. It just sounds incredible where when you want it to be clean, it sounds clean, but as you crank the resonance up, it can get this amazing growling sound that's almost reminiscent of the MS-20 in the best possible way. So let's demo a sound here. That's with no resonance. And as we turn the resonance up, put that through some reverb. I'm clipping a little bit here, sorry about that. Let's try that without the volume so hot. Really great sounding filter. One of the things I really love about this filter is that there's no stepping. A lot of the synths that I've looked at in the similar price range, such as the Dave Smith Rev 2, they really, in my opinion, suffer from the filter stepping when the resonance is cranked up. So the trade-off here is you do get a little bit of distortion, but I personally love that tone. It really allows for some aggressive sounds in my music. Moving on here, we have two envelopes. One is strictly for the amplitude. One is going to be for the filter, but can also modulate the pitch of one of the or both of the voltage control oscillators. Going back here to the modulation section, one of the cool features of this synth is that it has a very easy access to cross modulation, where you can either choose between sync, ring mod, or I believe a mix of the two. So that's going to sound like this. Again, really, really great for just creating interesting timbres that aren't your strict analog bread and butter sounds, which this can do as well. So moving on here, we've got a couple of things down here that are worth noting. We've got a menu system, which there's really not a lot of menu diving in this synth. That's another thing I really love about it, is that almost everything is knob per function on this synth, except for some of the more complicated functions. So for example, if I wanted to do some pitch modulation on the keys, I could go in here and change the LFO target to turn on or off key sync, turn on or off voice sync. Lovely. So a lot of the other things that are inside the menu system are really around the multi-engine. So what I love about this is that that really allows you to get as deep or as shallow as you want with the synth, because you have every single thing on the panel allows you to really have a classic analog synth that just does everything from 80s synth tones to modern super saws wonderfully. And the menu system is only really there if you want to truly deep dive and go into some interesting FM or digital territory. So I think compared to a lot of other synths I've used, this synth has a great balanced workflow between being a combined like knob per function analog synth and a really, really deep digital hybrid, as well as some of the interesting modulation territories that are hidden behind there too. Moving on here, we've got a couple of different effects. And another thing about this synth, the effects are just some of the best I've ever heard on a built-in synth. They're, in my humble opinion, they beat out synths way above their pay grade, such as the Prophet 6 or Rev 2 or OB6 even, for the quality of the effects on here. So a couple of them that I'll sample here. We'll get our ensemble, phaser, flanger, And then again, user effects. This synth allows you to load user effects, which can be everything from distortion all the way to new filters, tremolo, panning, and it really just, the sky's the limit, which is incredible because a lot of the things that are, in my opinion, possibly criticized about the synth that are missing from the initial, you can just get as user effects. So I'll leave a link in the description below to where you can get some of those user effects. There's some really great ones that are both free and paid. So moving on, the reverb. Again, incredible reverb. One of the best sounding reverbs I've heard on a synth here. We've got lots of different types of reverb too, which is great. I personally love the space. Really lush reverb, and then delays. Again, we've got a ton of really great sounding delays. This time I really love the tape delay. Just effects that really punch way above their pay grade. Oftentimes with this synth, I'll very regularly be actually recording the synth directly into Logic with its effects on, which is crazy rare for me. So yeah, moving on, final couple sections here. We've got a couple great controls that sound simple, but honestly, they really make this synth have a big difference. So you've got portamento, which can be polyphonic portamento, which I'll show you when I do some of the patches here. But then even better, we've got what's called voice spread, which is essentially just instant stereo width. So you can get up to 16 voices of polyphony that are all spread out all around the stereo field. Just sounds absolutely amazing. And then finally, we've got our different voice modes, which here's where the synth gets really versatile in my opinion. So it's got poly mode, which we've been listening to so far. We've got mono mode, which turns it into a mono synth. Unison, which puts all 16 oscillators into one voice detuned. And then chord mode, which again, it's personally, I never use chord mode, but it's there if you want to play one note chords. And then what the voice mode depth does. This is a modulator for each different mode. So with poly, you've got that classic kind of detuned supersaw sound. And then for mono, probably my favorite use of the modulator here, it creates sub frequencies up to 2 octaves below. Instant big bass. And then moving on to unison mode, affects the detune. So you can get some crazy trance leads or big room leads. And then chord changes the type of chord. Then next down here, we actually have the ability to make the synth multi-timbral. So you can play essentially one 8-voice synthesizer on this side, one on this side. You can layer the two together. You can even crossfade between. So the song will start, so pardon me, the synth will start on this side and end on this side at a completely different sound. So really, all of a sudden now you get 2 LFOs and you get 4 envelopes. So there's really a lot more going on here than meets the eye, because a lot of the more complicated sounds that you can create on the synth, which are very hard to replicate on others, involve creating 2 completely separate synth patches. One might have a really slow attack and a ton of modulation, while the other one might be a strong, punchy, percussive bass sound. And you can just get really creative with how you layer. Finally, we have some pretty basic stuff to go over here. So we've got our mod wheel, pitch wheel, octave buttons that are nice and handy. We've got an arpeggiator mode. It's fairly limited arpeggiator rather, but it does its trick. It's good for kind of synthwave basses or nice arps that go on in the back of my music. And then finally, my final, honestly, probably one of my favorite features of this whole synth, we've got a built-in analog low frequency compressor to just add extra bass and extra analog warmth to the sound. So without it, we've been listening to the whole time. With it, It'll be more apparent on bass sounds, but really if you just get... it sounds really, really, really fat and really thick. So this is the kind of thing where I almost always honestly leave this on all the time, and the 8-voice version of this synth doesn't include that. So if you are considering getting the synth, I highly recommend saving for the 16 because of the fact that this low frequency compressor, I almost always leave it on. So yeah, what I'll do now, I'll go over a couple of patches that I've made, so you guys can kind of see what the versatility of the synth is, as well as I'll play a couple of the factory presets, just so you guys can see what it sounds like out of the box. And I'm not really a keyboard player, but we'll do our best here. Anyways, check it out. And that's a wrap. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today of me reviewing the Korg Prologue 16-voice analog synth. It really is an amazing machine. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you guys liked about the video, what your thoughts are. Have you ever bought a synth before? If so, which one do you have? Yeah, again, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. We're making a community here, and your guys' input really matters to me. So all the best. Until next time, Miles Away out.